Thank you, Jerry. Good morning, everyone. How you guys doing this morning?
Good.
Yeah, all right. I know it's early, right? Anyone have coffee yet?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully I won't put you to sleep. Okay. No, my name is Chung Lee. I'm from Maryland, America. If anyone's from Maryland, close to connected to Washington D.C., the Virginia area. Born and raised. So my Korean is 대학교 한국말 조금 할 수 있어요. 근데 이제 안 할게요. So that's about it. But we get by, you know, where's the restroom, where's the restaurant, you know, samgyeopsal, you know, all that good stuff. But yeah, I had the privilege to, yes, thank you. I had the privilege to be here today to join Creative Mornings and to my brother Danny and Jay, and to talk about this concept of reality. And the challenge was, I gotta take this word and kind of talk about how am I going to translate this in terms of, you know, the creativity and so forth. And so kind of what I want to talk about is the reality, in terms of reality, the impact of artistry. Okay? As an artist, what is the reality of the impact we have in terms of the art that we create? Okay. So, first question, I just want to ask, you guys don't have to answer this, you can just answer it in your head. And there's no right or wrong answer. But when you think about artistry, what do you think about? You know, what do you think of, right? Sometimes we think of beauty, right? When you think of paintings and pictures, portraits, we think of beautiful imagery, that sort of thing. Sometimes we think it as an expression or expressing ourselves, right? There's paintings, there's music, there's different ways of arts of expressing ourselves, especially like photography, the way we shoot our images. Sometimes we think of emotions trying to display a certain type of feeling, a certain type of emotion, right? Or maybe sometimes we think of artistry as an escape. Art is a way to kind of escape reality, in a sense, right? Whether you're an artist or whether you're the one kind of consuming the art, right? But whatever we may think of artistry, one thing that we know it is that it is an expression of the artist, and many times the artist's experiences, right? So when you look at paintings, when you hear music, when you look at photography, when you look at these things in art, a lot of times it portrays the experience of the artist. A lot of times it is a kind of illustration of the inside of the artist's heart and their experience, either the pain or the struggle, whatever it may be, right? But if we, wrong way. But if we look at perspective, how do we perceive art, okay? One thing is many people have the perspective that art is used as an escape, right? Like we talked about escape reality. I myself, you know, kind of a little bit about myself, I used hip-hop kind of as an escape when I was younger because I'm sure many can relate if, you know, you grow up in the Korean culture. My dad was very Korean cultured, conservative. I was like, man, he never understands me, you know? And I grew up as an angry kid, so when I listened to like this gangster hip-hop back in like the late 80s, early 90s, it was very angry, very violent. And I was like, oh man, that's how I feel, right? So I use it as an escape, to escape my pain, right? But when you use art to face reality, okay? When you use art to face reality, that's when real change happens, okay? Rather than using art to escape reality, when we use art to face reality, that's when real change happens. Why? Because using the arts as a vehicle to face the reality of our pains, our struggles, even our joys, in our lives, it causes us to embrace the reality of these truths rather than flee from them. Okay? I think as an artist it's important, because if we truly want to express ourselves authentically, genuinely, we can't escape the reality of our lives. We can't escape the reality of the things we're going to, but rather, we should embrace it, we should face it, and be able to share that openness, that vulnerability with the world, because that is what really connects people, you know. Like even with music, there's times when they may not be from your culture, they may not be from your generation or whatever it may be, right? When that music talks about, let's just take marriage or love, everybody understands that language, right? Doesn't matter if you're Korean, if you're American, if you're French or Russian, you know, the word may sound different, but everyone can relate to that, right? So it transcends culture. And And the reason is because this is the true expression of the human experience, okay? It speaks to that most intimate and personal part of our hearts. I don't understand this yet, okay? But I observe when people go to an art gallery, they stand in front of like an art piece like this, right? And they're just like, and then more people come. And they just stand there for like minutes, and they just soak it in. And when I look at it, I'm thinking like, what? But for them, it's like, it speaks to them. And they're, this art piece is speaking to me. And I'm like, what is it saying? I don't understand what it's saying. But, that's what it does. It reaches the deep, personal, intimate parts of the human heart. That's what art does. I don't know if you guys are familiar with who Chuck Berry is. Chuck Berry was a pioneer in rock and roll back in the mid-50s. Chuck Berry, so let me give you some background. Mid-50s, if you don't know, many of you probably know, but that was a time in history in America where there was a lot of racism, especially between whites and blacks. Okay? And they still had the bathrooms set aside for the whites, bathrooms set aside for the blacks. There was still a lot of racial tension. Okay? But Chuck Berry, his music, when he did shows, they had concerts and they split the concerts where the whites would sit on one side, the blacks would sit on the other side. But once he started jamming out, it was like they didn't care about that segregation anymore, and all of them just started partying and enjoying the concert together. The police would have to break up the concert, they would throw him out. He would be rejected from certain cities because he was integrating culture. And the thing is, his music was so transcendent that the whites and blacks, even though they grew up in that, they knew the laws, they knew they could get arrested, they knew they were breaking it. They didn't care. So this is what was happening here when he plays his music, what's happening here at these concerts. This is speaking to the human heart that goes beyond these barriers, that goes beyond these things that keep us separated as humans, right? Another thing, I love Naruto, okay? Who's watching Naruto here? Come on. Let's be honest. All right. Some of you guys didn't raise your hands. Come on. But Naruto, if you watch this anime series, it's so great because he's really cool, he's really funny, all that stuff. But when you look at the bad guys, right? When you see the bad guys, they're so evil. And these guys are like, man, that person. Man, if I was Naruto, man, I make that shiny young whatever, do my jutsu. They're so bad, the enemies, right? But then, as the anime goes on, they start going into the background stories of these bad guys. And they start going into how they were raised as a child, what happened to them. And when you see their story, all of a sudden the bad guy who you originally thought was like really evil, you sympathize with them. You see their story and like, I understand that, I can relate to that. Like, you're not such a bad guy after all, because you can almost relate, like, if that happened to me, I'd probably turn out the same way, right? And so art has a very interesting way to help transcend these understandings, to really penetrate the human heart. So when we use art to face reality, that's when real change happens. Right? We really express the true, authentic, genuine self. And I wanted to share a little bit about what we've done. Kind of what we do is I run a label called Good Fruit Co., along with James over there and Sam Ock. And, we've seen this just within our own music. Our mission has been to engage culture through media that encourages, that brings hope, and connects with people, right? And so, what we've seen is, like, my father, like I shared with you before, he's not a hip-hop guy, okay? But when he sees that this music is being used in a positive way, he can understand that. And he can relate to that, because that's what's real. That's the reality of it, right? And what we've seen is music has been a vehicle to bridge generational gaps. especially with the generation here in Korea, and I just use it because we're here, and because it's very similar to my upbringing with my father. There's a big disconnect between the first generation and second generation. There's a big cultural disconnect. And how do we relate? How do we communicate, with one another? There's a big disconnect there, But no matter what I would tell him or speak to him, or even when we go and do shows, no matter what we try to tell the people, it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. But then once they hear music, they're like, I like it. And just for the sole fact that they like it, they can relate to it, is something positive. The reality of it is, it begins to become acceptable. Because it speaks to their heart. And it's kind of weird, because I don't even understand how that happens. It speaks to the heart in a way where I can't penetrate myself with words, right? It's like Bach. This is the Bach or Mozart, the classical melodies. There's no lyrics to that music. It's just music, right? But it speaks to your heart, right? And then when you, especially like, I don't know if you guys ever listened to opera before, okay? I haven't listened to too much opera, because it's kind of hurts my ears, But when you listen to opera though, a lot of the stories are very painful. They're very much about like relationships or hurt or back in the medieval ages kind of thing. And when you actually read the lyrics and understand what they're really talking about, you kind of understand why so many people go and watch opera, right? Because it penetrates, it speaks to people's hearts, right? And so what we've seen, especially here, we obviously, I don't speak Korean too well, we don't speak Korean too well, but the reason why we still continue to come to Korea is because of music, right? Music is the vehicle that connects. And so art, I think the reality really is, we really have to look at it in a sense of, it's not just art within itself. Whenever we create something, whenever we write something, whenever we paint something or take a photo of something, we're conveying a message. We're putting something on display. We're telling the world something, right? So arts have a way of connecting people, and it speaks a universal language that transcends culture, right? And you can see that in history, like Chuck Berry. And if you guys didn't know that Chuck Berry, he's the one who influenced Elvis Presley, actually. So Elvis Presley is probably a name you're maybe more familiar with. That's how much of an influence Chuck Berry was, So art, music really has a way to go beyond the barriers of culture. And I really think that as artists, our duty, part of our job as being artists, right? Because sometimes as artists, we think, oh, I need to create art, but at the same time, we don't think of it in terms of like, when we think of a career, like when you have a job description, right? When you're artists, I guess sometimes we think our job description is like, well, I'm a painter, so I paint. I'm a writer, so I write. I'm a hip-hop artist, so I do hip-hop. I'm a photographer, so I shoot photos, right? But I think it needs to go beyond that. That our duty, like our job description, should really be to represent the realest form of our reality. So it contribute to encourage society to embrace the realities of the human experience, and at the same time bring hope. That's what art was really for. If you look historically, even Woodstock, I know Woodstock's not the greatest example, but during the time of the Vietnam War and post, it did bring about this idea of joy and peace and unification, right? So to wrap things up, reality in terms of the arts, right? I think as artists, we really need to embrace the fact that, one, whatever I create, let it represent who I really am. And not be fearful to be authentic, because people need that. People need that authenticity. People need that realism, because that's what really connects with them. And I think especially our generation, we can kind of point out when people are kind of being like, he's not being too real, it's pretty see-through. But I think for art, in its truest form, in its purest form, should represent the reality of our reality, so I can really connect people and really bring them together. I remember, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this show, but it's called The Last Comic Standing. Has anyone heard of that show? Okay. So, what was his name? Keenan Ivory Wayans. Do you guys know a show called Living Color? I'm probably dating myself here, right? This was like Jim Carrey, Jamie Foxx, all those guys that got their start, okay? This is like way back when I was a kid. But Keenan Ivory Wayans has a show called Last Comic Standing. And one of the comics came up, and you know, when you watch comedians do their stand-up, it's very edgy, right? They'll take social topics, they'll take, you know, political, you know, topics, and they'll kind of joke about it in a way where you're like, whoa, that's pretty in your face, right? And this one guy came up and he was making these jokes, and I won't say those jokes because it was kind of, you know, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but at the end of it, Keenan Ivory Wayans says, he commented this guy and commended him because he was like, this is the purpose of comic stand-up. This is the purpose of comedians. That we can take things that are hard for people to digest. We can take things that are hard for people to understand or to accept and make them laugh at it. And make them laugh about it, right? To make it lighter. Right? And he said, this is the art of what it means to be a comedian. Right? So, the topic of reality I just want to share with you today, I think the reality is, as artists, we always must remember we are presenting something, you know? And to keep that in mind, that when I create something, I'm creating it, and it will have purpose, whether I think it does or not. It will have purpose. It will have meaning. And so, what best way to put that on display than represent ourselves? And the reality is the world around us. So, this is just my contact information, my email, and I can give you my phone number because I'd be long distance calling for you guys, so it's too much fees. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. This is our website. And I just also want to share that on June 1st, we'll also be back here to share kind of a curriculum that we're doing in terms of the arts and faith, so that interests anybody. We'll be doing a pilot of that. And then on June 5th, our group called NIP, that's called Good Foucault with James and Sam Locke, will be here to do a concert on June 5th. So just want to share that with you guys, and thank you very much for having me today.